I'm Joe Rockey, and before we begin this episode of Father and Joe, I invite everyone to give us some feedback. In episode 383 and 384, we gave specific drills that you can implement in your life. What we are asking is, can you give us feedback upon implementing them and sending us the results to fatherandjoe@gmail.com. Thank you very much. And here is this upcoming episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, obviously relationships are the glue of society. They're the glue of how we build. We are social people. Our brains are built to be in relationship with each other. And in the last episode, we talked specifically about the need and the desire to want to connect with your family. Sometimes that's hard. And in that conversation, you mentioned something that I found particularly important as just a reminder as far as what you said heaven really is, which is being in perfect relationship with everyone. And it has had me thinking of, I'm not totally sure I know what heaven is, or maybe even in a broader sense, when you get done saying the rosary, one of the last prayers you say is, make me worthy for the promises of Christ. In some regards, I don't think we ever really spend enough time talking about what those promises of Christ are, obviously heaven being one of them. And I think that would be a good thing to discuss and think about, especially as we're starting to approach Christmas and Advent, and goes, there's a reason God put himself on earth. Like, let's talk about the upsides of this, not just the negative, you're doing it wrong sin stuff, which tends to focus the Catholic community probably more so than I think it should. But that's the digression. What I'd like to talk to is the promises of Christ and heaven in particular.
Yeah, beautiful. It's I love how you pick up on these things. We say a lot of these things, and it's like, why do I keep saying that thing? What does that actually mean? And yeah, the promises of Christ is, pray for us, O Holy Mother of God, that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ. And he promises really always to forgive and to have mercy as we are open to receiving. We can always receive his mercy. He promises always to be with us. I will be with you always to the end of the age. In a way, he is always speaking eternal truths when he speaks in Scripture. So when he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and find life burdensome, and I will give you rest," that's a promise that applies for all time. He's always there to receive you when you are weary and find life burdensome. He will always extend that rest to you. And so what we hear him say, that he will send another advocate to be with us, the Holy Spirit, who will lead us into all truth, who will console us. And as he promises that he will continue to be at work in order to bring us to salvation, that he will be present to us. And he gives us a church against which the gates of hell shall not prevail. So all of these different things could be seen as or understood as the promises of Christ. He is promising his grace for our salvation and sanctification. He is promising to make himself available to us and invite us into a communion with himself. He is, and he's not going to give up on us. He promises always to be the good shepherd, you could say, and he will gather up his sheep, including finding the lost ones and bringing us to green pasture. So we can count on God upholding his end of the bargain. God will never betray us. He is faithful to his promises. He is faithful to his word. And so we can really count on that. And so we always discover that the broken end of the relationship is always our end. Our difficulty in trusting, our unwillingness to enter into or remain in relationship with Him, our hesitations, and um, the, the ways that we resist Him and are not open to the love that He wants to show us. And that happens for a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes willful resistance. More often, there's an unconscious or a subconscious weakness that is keeping us from Him. But in any event, we are always the end of the relationship that's in need of ongoing conversion. Jesus doesn't have to get better at fulfilling His promises. We have to get better at trusting in them and receiving them.
Yeah, and thinking about what you just said there, I think so much of that is taken for granted, both from the way that we discuss the church and the faith, and from as a result, those practicing it as well. You know, you go into any bulletin, you can see when confessions are. That's the sacramental form of receiving mercy, right? It doesn't, you don't solely receive mercy through the sacrament of reconciliation, but you certainly do as part of that process. So, you being a priest, you've discussed this before, is, how often do we present, our priestly duties of offering times for confession? And you've mentioned that in a scheduling issue. It's like, well, do we only do it for 30 minutes because there's only 30 minutes worth of people coming, or do only 30 minutes worth of people come because we only offer for 30 minutes? It's like a chicken or an egg type question. Um so but the point being is that it's always around us and it's always prevalent. Um, Quite frankly, you can talk to any priest in person, and it doesn't need to be during the slotted windows, and they're able to give you confession. That's one of the cool things about it. It's different in that regards from some of the other sacraments, like have to go through at least 6 months of marital training, and having someone who wants to marry you. There's scheduling involved in that, and there's effort. But when we talk about the mercy and the other promises you made and how we take them for granted, it seems ubiquitous. And your point there, that it's not God that's letting us down here. It's not Jesus who's not saying, "Oh, it's Thursday. I'd rather be watching football. I'm not going to deal with you right now." That's not how this works, and how it's our own issues that keep us from going there. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is incredibly profound is that it might not be even intentionally conscious trying to avoid talking or thinking about the promises and the greatness of Christ. There are people that subconsciously don't think they're worth having nice things, whatever that means in your world. And there's certainly mindset elements of that. And I invite this conversation to be shared for a lot of reasons. Is one is that just knowing what I know about the subconscious is that you can't hear something and not think about it at least a little bit. And if it's something that sits upon you and an important thing, just like watching a colony of ants through the glass window, eventually it'll crawl into the right spot. You might not know how it's getting there or why it's going the route it does, but that's how thoughts inside your head work. And just opening yourself up to, wow, I guess I never really thought that any single time God is doing this for me. And he's doing this because at the end of the day, we are worth something to him. This whole concoction of life wouldn't have to exist if he didn't want it to, but he did. And you just think of it like that, as like, this isn't an invention that some higher being created, like the aliens showed up one day and boom, they created a special laboratory and out came people. That's not how it is. This is an actual meaningful gift and how we're going about it. So, Father, I apologize if I went down a weird road there, but I do think that thinking about what is given to us and why it's given to us is profoundly important and meaningful for just thinking about it.
Yeah, I love the things that you said there, Joe, in terms of how there are different things subconsciously, places that we need deeper transformation, and reasons that we resist that we're not aware of. And it's there's a whole ongoing process of conversion, and opening ourselves to the promises of Christ often involves parallel processes of opening ourselves to relationships with others, the promises offered by others. It's the reason we don't trust Jesus is because we don't trust. And we don't trust because we have a reason not to trust. We weren't born that way. Um, and so we often are in a position of identifying sometimes the wounds to trust and then working through a process of healing to open up to greater trust. People have promised us things and have let us down. And that, as you said, I thought beautifully in our last episode, you talked about the blending of colors and how colors don't sort of live in their own spaces. So my relationship with one person bleeds over into my relationship with another person. And that's true about our relationship with God, maybe particularly because our relationship with God is really overlapping with all of our relationships. And so where there is broken trust, where there is relational woundedness, where there is betrayal and pain, and those things all affect our relationship with God and our openness to His promises in our lives. And so, seeing where it's hard to trust in His promises, where, or as you said, we don't feel like we deserve it, and why is that? Well, somebody has made us feel that we don't deserve it. Some point in life has reinforced that lie, or has, in some cases, just not made us feel that we deserve it. Knowing that I'm a gift, actually experiencing that because somebody has received me as a gift and helped me to experience what that's like through their heart, through their eyes, through their responses to me. That's something that needs to be built up in us. And when it hasn't been built up, we have the feeling that we're not a gift to God. And then why would He give us anything? Why would He make any kind of promise to us? And so then we lower the ceiling on what that actually means. Well, when Jesus says, "I'm with you always," I mean, my dad said that, and he wasn't with me always. In fact, he wasn't with me when I needed him the most, but he was with me when he needed me. And that's probably what Jesus means too. We don't consciously think that out, but those are the kinds of patterns. And that's not true about my dad, by the way. I was just using that as an example. Um, we can develop these kinds of patterns and not realize that they're affecting us. And that's where some evangelical preaching, and I mean that the preaching the gospel, some fervent preaching can really challenge us about how much we trust in the Father's love for us. Do we really believe we have a Father who loves us, who sees us, who knows our needs, and who treasures that? Uh, I think of several people whose father never really understood what they wanted, let alone provided it for them. And that just gets mapped onto God. Now they learn to cope with that. If they had been crushed by disappointment and sadness their whole life growing up, they wouldn't have made it out of childhood. And so they learn to live with that as if it were something normal. And then they learn to live with God not really believing or seeing what's important to them and feeling like if I want something that I really want, then I have to sneak it. I have to do it for myself. Um, and those, yeah, so easy for those patterns to develop in us. But Jesus really does love us. He really does want to lead us to green pastures. He really does rescue us. He really does stand up for us. He really does have good things for us. And yeah, it's part of our growth in Christian life to open ourselves more and more to that truth.
And that's a fear that doesn't go away. It doesn't matter what stage of life you get to, what barometer of other metric of success you achieve. It is part of life. I just using my own example here. I distinctly remember when we first started this episode, knowing that we were going to talk to 50 people and the goosebumps and the fear that I would have before we would start an episode. And as I mentioned in the last episode, we have now filled an NFL stadium. Like that is massive. yeah, the number's bigger, and that's all true, but it doesn't mean that feeling has gone away. So in the one regards, yes, I've achieved so much more. So we've just achieved so much more than we did in the beginning. We're reaching out to more people. We're presumably making that much more of a difference, but it hasn't changed the amount of. I really hope this works. I hope this technology thing doesn't glitch and that Comcast doesn't make problems right now. I hope that we've obviously grown better in communicating with each other and learning more about each other through the years as relationship growth goes. But it doesn't mean it's not scary, and that when there's a spinning wheel, as we talked about before the recording starts, on our thing here, that I don't have this little panic inside of me. And this is just simple web conferencing. This isn't talking about, a family gathering or some other element. We all naturally create moments in our minds that are bigger than other moments. It's a natural thing. And it doesn't matter to a certain extent what the previous experiences were, because we know there's going to be another big moment coming ahead of us. We don't necessarily know exactly when or how it's going to present itself, but it's going to. And do we want to consciously look for these types of moments where I can say as an opportunity to grow into trust, knowing that growing into that trust, the comfort that, what, obviously relationships require the other person, but I'm going to give all I can. And maybe going back to that last episode, the way I interact with people isn't exactly the greatest way. Yelling at people and making up evidence, as you used as your example with your family, maybe that's just a technique thing I need to change. But the core desire of trusting and wanting to build a relationship with people is universal and needed. And I think that what you have told us here today about God always being willing to extend there, always being willing to be there. And what our previous notions, we don't even know that we have them, because that's how your subconscious works, unless you're incredibly attuned and have done a ton of self-respective training and etc., which is a lot of effort. Most of us have no idea what's going on, what the actual foundations inside our brain look like. And that's why I say look for the future opportunities where I can be more trusting, where I can open up to someone. When you're driving down the road and there's someone begging for money at the corner, do you instinctually look down so you don't make eye contact? Because if I make eye contact, they might come and ask me for money, which I don't have, or I don't want to give them. Or do you go a different direction, say, I'll still, make eye contact, I might even wave, but I'm not going to give them anything? Well, that's okay too. That's much better than option one. But these are just little examples that we have regularly in life that we could open ourselves up and be better in relationships. So, Father, I give you the opportunity to conclude this episode, because I think it's so important, and if for no other reason, to put some conscious thought into the positive upsides of what Christ is promising, rather than just thinking about all the things that I'm doing wrong keeping me from being there.
Yeah, we took a turn to the negative there. It's yeah, so important to, and I'm glad that we could put our finger on some of the things that, maybe touch on something that one or another of our listeners struggles with and wasn't aware of it, and ways that we're holding him at bay that we didn't realize is good to notice. The pathway for human formation is self-awareness, leading to self-acceptance, leading to self-possession or self-mastery, leading to self-gift. So that's our pathway, and self-awareness is the starting point. So it can be good to name some of those things and help some growth in self-awareness. But a few of the positive things. Jesus believes in us, and Jesus is always forgiving. Jesus never gets tired of forgiving. Jesus never gets tired of repeating his promises. He wants so badly for us to trust in his promises and respond to him that he dies for us. He knows us and understands us. He is patient with our weakness, and He will be with us always. He will stop at nothing to reach us, and He will work through everyone and everything that He can to break through to our hearts. He wants to bring us home and for us to know that we have a loving Father who has always wills our good. Those are the promises, and those are the places that we can really place our trust and grow in meeting Him.
And I think that that's the natural thing to take away from this episode. Think about those promises and opportunities and how to grow with them. And to a certain extent, share them with others, and how you can go about and doing that and looking for opportunities to make that happen. Because the other great part that happens is you end up becoming better at everything. Going back to that example from last week, you start putting the Kellers you want into your relationship pond. It ends up being a lot better than just a hogwash of a Keller you don't want. But if you're constantly pouring in what you want into your relationships, it does grow across the board. And then the secret of life is it becomes better because it's not about time. It's not about money. It's about the quality of your relationships, and everything will improve from there. So we thank everyone for listening. We thank everyone for sharing. And if you haven't already, please do leave us a written review on whichever platform you are. We do get significant spikes when you guys do that. So we thank you guys for doing that. We'll be with you again next week.